Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 345 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Stack the Wins. Our quote of the day comes to us from Ray Lewis. Greatness is a lot of small things done well, stacked up on each other. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating, and please share the link with a friend so we can help spread our no-quit message and mission to a much wider audience. I'm really excited to speak with today's guest. Dana Cavalea worked incredibly close with some of the greatest baseball players of all time. Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, and Mariano Rivera, just to name a few. So whether or not you are a baseball fan or a New York Yankees fan, I know you will enjoy today's episode. Dana, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
My short answer is yes. I'm ready to go, because actually that's my approach to really everything I do, because it's too hard to impact everybody at once. So start with one, and one becomes another, and one becomes another. So one hit a day. We'll start here.
I love that. I want to just ask, just a follow-up to that, is I find that so many people are focusing on the big, in the sense of I need to have thousands of followers and impact thousands of people. And I, in no way, shape, or form do I want to not encourage everybody. But I think what you just said is something that a lot of our guests have touched on in the past 6 months, 2 years, just the focus of one person. So if you impact me, then I'm going to go home and impact my kids or my coworkers or somebody at the gym. And then all of a sudden they're going to do that. So even though it just starts with one person, I think the compound effect within us is just so much more powerful than we realize at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'd be lying to you if I said, I don't think about increasing that impact from one person to maybe 1 million people a day, right? I would be lying. But what I've realized in my journey and through life, and I'm sure you have as well, is that it never works that way. It's like when you put a business plan together and you go profitable on the business plan, like on day one, it just never turns out that way. And actually the plan that you write and show up with on day one is never the plan, and never how it looks, come sometimes the end of month one. And you have to embrace that. And it's too hard to please everybody, because it's impossible. And it's too hard to put that pressure on yourself. And I'm a type A, I'm a high horsepower, go get it guy. And when I put pressure on myself, and I'm assuming a lot of your audience can relate to this, it never ends well, right? It's always this extra added burden. And every day I have to talk myself out of that sick pressure that I put on myself. And every day in enduring that little battle, it keeps me focused actually on that one person, the one person that writes back to me after I send out a blog and say, hey, I needed that today, or a newsletter or a post or whatever. And that gives me life to go do it again, go do it again, go do it again. And at the end of the day, when you tally up all your chips, that impact that you had is really all that matters.
I love that. And one thing you said, I just want to repeat for our listeners, when you talk about a blog or a post, when you get that one message, when somebody says, I needed that today, something that I share often, and I really try to encourage people to continue to make those positive posts and uplifting messages and podcasts and blogs, because what we don't know is what we don't see. So for example, if you post something and I comment on it and say, hey, Dana, that was a great post, I loved it, obviously you're going to see that and you see my comment, or if I like it or give it a thumbs up. But what I always challenge people on is it's not about the likes. Yes, we all would rather have 1,000 likes than 0. But what I always say is, what about that one person or those 2 people that don't post, they don't comment, they don't like something, but they go home and it impacts them, and then they then impact their classroom or their team or their company. And I think that's the beauty of what we don't know, because we all see the comments and likes that are there, but we don't know the people that we're impacting as well.
It's true. And I think we get hung up on likes and all of that other stuff when we don't give the ultimate like, right? Which is like ourself. Hey, you got to like yourself. And when you like yourself, you don't worry about the external applause as much. And that's what I have found, again, just in my own personal journey of development and developing others, is it's that self. That's where it begins. And if you could embrace that, you got a great chance of winning every day. I wrote something today and it said, see the opportunity within yourself before you hyper focus on whether there's opportunity outside or not. Because if you see yourself as opportunistic, it's amazing how all of a sudden all these opportunities start showing themselves. And the asterisk I always put on opportunity is this: it never shows up on your timeline, so don't expect it to. And that's the truth. Whether you're building a podcast audience, whether you're building a financial business, whether you're opening a franchise restaurant, whatever it is, it will never happen on your timeline. And sometimes we surprise ourselves and we say, man, that happened quick. I didn't realize that was going to happen so quick. So timelines and pace, I always say, are two things that we have to be very aware of. And when we push timelines and when we force pace, we can get ourselves in big trouble. And we can't operate freely.
I think that is so true in so many ways. And in regards to timelines and opportunity, I think one of the things that I see is people comparing themselves to the other people's highlights. So for example, if you had a podcast that's been out for 3 years and I started mine this week, if I'm comparing mine to yours, it doesn't matter how great my first episode or second episode is. You've been doing something for such a longer time. And I think what we do within the social media world of instant gratification is we're comparing ourselves to other people's highlight reels. And it's okay to, I believe, want to emulate other people's success. And I think it's okay to look up to somebody that's achieved something, but it's such a bad thing. And I'd love to get your perspective on comparing yourself to others, especially when they're at a high level or have been doing it for such a longer time than you.
Yeah. There's a couple interesting directions you can go with that. When it comes to Instagram or Insta life, you got to be careful what you wish for. But I follow a formula, and the formula is this, and it's knowing who I am. Like, I'm not a quick hit guy. I'm not a quick winner. I've never been a quick winner. So for me, it's always success over time. That's my magic formula. Success over time. And stack the wins. I have a client I work with. He's probably worth about $850 million. And he told me this. He said, Dana, go out every day and hit a single. And if that's all you do for today, that was a good day. You hit a single, and tomorrow you come back and you hit another single. And, a few singles every week put runs on the board. And you can't forget that. And that's a baseball analogy, to a baseball guy, which I really appreciate. But where you are today, I always say there could have been a point in your life where you dreamed that you'd be where you are today. Like, some days I wake up and I say, wow, look at all that you've done so far. Amazing. Like, could you have scripted this the way it's turned out? And my answer is always no. And I think when we get in the comparison game, again, it's a dangerous game because you always lose. There's always somebody with more fans. There's always somebody with more money. There's always someone who has a life that appears better than yours. And I tell you what, I coach a lot of these people, from professional athletes to entertainers to folks in finance and business. And those that appear to have it all, they also have days when they don't feel that great either. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, again, very, very successful in finance. And he says, I feel like a total imposter. And I said, you've been doing this for 30 years. You live in a beautiful home, in a beautiful community, with a beautiful wife, with the dogs, with the Bentley, with everything. And you feel like an imposter? So none of us are immune to it. So if you think about that, I mean, if you know that many people are in that situation, we're all actors and we're all imposters, right? Let's just get that out and now go to work. So when you get that mentality, hey, actor, imposter. Well, the ones that get over it are the ones that just go to work. Just work. Just when you get nervous, when you get scared, when you hesitate, when you get fearful, do something. Make your default work with effort and never look for a quick fix because it doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. So, that's the way I look at it. I want to sell 1,000,000 books. Have you sold one? I didn't not give one away. Have you sold a book? Great. You sold a book. You're ahead of like 99% of the people because 99% of people never wrote a book. So you got to remember that it's those little wins, man, and you got to keep going after them.
I love that. And something I say often is small wins lead to huge victories. And I think being a sports guy yourself and me being a sports guy as well, I've never seen a championship won in the first minute of the season. When you worked with the Yankees, you guys didn't have a fantastic first inning in game one, and all of a sudden they said, "All right, guys, you guys played amazing in game one. We're going to forego the 161 left, and here's the World Series." It's the opposite. It's the first win, then the first win on the road, then the first winning streak, and I think what you said is so powerful. Success over time and stack the wins, and I think people miss the importance of stacking the wins or looking at what they've done. Yes, maybe you have that huge goal in the end, but you break it down into bite-sized pieces. So I truly appreciate that. One fun question we ask each guest that I'm actually really intrigued by what you're going to say is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only pick one word, what word did you pick?
You know what word popped in my head? And it's a crazy word because I never thought I'd use this word. Animal. Just animal. Like I'm not afraid to go after it. And I'll go after it and I'll be relentless in that pursuit. But it's like that animal instinct, like, let's go. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just go and make it happen. And it's like chasing prey every day.
I wasn't sure where you were going with your answer, but I think it's a fantastic answer based on who you are and what you do. But want to jump into your book, Habits of a Champion. Nobody becomes a champion by accident, which, first of all, I absolutely loved. Second of
Thank
all,
you.
I have to say it's on the shorter side. So for me, I love those books where you can just boom, go through it, because I think so many people, and the statistics are insane about how many people actually don't finish a book. So I don't want to miss the importance of it. But what you said and what you shared and what you wrote about was so much within, not only before working with the Yankees, but also during working with the Yankees. And you worked with some of the most amazing baseball players of all time. And early on in the book, you and we're talking about Derek Jeter, and something Derek Jeter said to you that hit you was, not everybody's rooting for you. And I circled it. I folded the page down, and I actually posted something about it. And I wanted to just get your perspective on it, because I think it's this idea of being liked by everybody and wanting everybody to like you. And not that in any way we don't want that, but I think when you realize that everybody's not gonna root for you, you talk about haters, but then when you break it down, that might be in your circle, might be in your team, and might be in your family, it just hit me. So I was hoping you wouldn't mind briefly touching on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, Derek Jeter's an interesting guy, and I'm lucky. I met him when I was 19 years old, and he was very big on people, and he knew that most people were not his fans. He had a lot of fans, but he had a lot of people that were not his fans, whether it was jealous of how much he made, and jealous of his looks, jealous of whatever, right? So you have people in life that are not going to be your fans, and it's okay. Use that as fuel. And that's what we always talked about. Use that as your fuel that moves you forward. It doesn't mean that you have to walk around with a visible chip on your shoulder, but you can play very well with a chip on your shoulder. And, there's a lot of language out there today that I talk a lot about, which is, it's be kind and be this and be that. And I'm like, no, don't be you. And if you're not kind, you could still treat people nicely. But there's people that I've seen perform very, very well with an edge. They're not very likable people. It's not who they are. And I know that could be misinterpreted, and I don't want it to go against the grain of the show, but you got to be who you are. And there's certain people I feel who are on this earth, and they're built for the extremes. And that's because it's who they are. And if and I've coached a lot of these people, when you try to coach them away from that, there's like snapback that comes with it, and it affects their performance negatively. So whoever you are, really, that's who you have to be. And when it comes to your fans, you can't just be this and be that and be this and be that to please your fans, because everyone can see it. Everybody can see when somebody's not authentic. And years ago, when I gave all that up, I realized that there'd probably be less people that liked me, but there'd be a whole lot of people that liked me because I'm speaking their language and they're like, yeah, that's right. I don't agree with that. And, I kind of love that shirt that you have over your shoulder. You have to make a choice in life, right? Lion or sheep? Who do you want to be? And if you want to be a sheep, go ahead, be a sheep. It's okay. But if you want to be a lion, be that too. But make sure that you own that. And that's the way I look at all this. And what I found in working with high level athletes, right, is that the ones that did the best, they had an edge to them, like an Andy Pettit, a Christian guy from Texas, sweetheart kind of guy. He will rip your head off. He'll rip your head off. But so he's got that nice guy, but he's also got a different gear. But he is not worried about pleasing anybody. And that's a common theme.
No, I think that is so powerful the way you shared it. And a follow-up question I have to that is, don't you feel, or do you feel that those different personas come out at different points? For example, when Andy's going to speak to a middle school, he's not having that rip your head off mentality, but then it's, 6 inning, 2 outs, 2 balls, 2 strikes. That's a different Andy. And I think goes back to your point about owning who you are and being who you are. And again, the goes back to the question is, you're not going to like everybody, and not that you want people not to be your fans. Nobody really can say, I want everybody against me. But once I think you realize that at different points you have to be different people, I think that allows you to really step into who you are at those different times.
Yeah. And Chris, there's going to be people that don't like you, and there's going to be people that like you. Your fans, your crowd, your tribe will always find you. They'll always find you. They will connect. So when you put something out there and you just say, hey, this is what I believe, this is what I'm putting out, yes, you're going to repel a portion of people, but you're also going to attract a portion of people as well. So you can't be for everybody. I mean, just think about an ice cream store. That's why there's so many flavors. It is what it is. There's some things in there and I say, I'll never have that, ever. It's not for me. And somebody else will walk in and say, this is the best.
That's why Baskin Robbins has 31 flavors, and that's why Ben and Jerry's keeps, coming up with, it's almost like, I'm a huge ice cream guy, but it's like almost every week or two, to your point, something comes out, and I'd say 1 out of every 5 or 6, I'm like, oh, that looks really good. But the other ones, I'm like, yeah, I have no desire. But, then all of a sudden you come in and you're like, that's the best flavor. I can't wait to taste it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But
if I were to guess, you have your go-to, which is just Old Faithful. This is what I'm religious to. I mean, it's going to take me a little something. There's going to have to be something special to get me away from this. This is my thing. And that's the way I believe we're all supposed to be, right? We all have our things. We all have what it is that we like, what we're attracted to, what attracts us, who it is that we attract. And that's what makes it all work. But I believe this, you talk about, I know we may be sidestepping a little bit. You talk about depression, you talk about stress, you talk about anxiety. I firmly believe that much of that exists because you have people that are like Ferraris with the e-brake on, and the e-brake is them not embracing themselves. So they're hitting the gas and they want to go forward and they want to go here, but they won't release the brake because they're trying to please this person and they're trying to make this person happy. And they just don't go after what they believe because they're so worried about the interpretation or how others will perceive them. And when you have that, literally that F it moment, you could move yourself forward. And that's how we coach athletes at the highest levels. Like, hey, who are you playing for? Are you playing for your contract? Are you playing for your agent? Who are you playing for? And when they finally start realizing that they want to play for them again, they could break off a lot of that baggage.
I think so many people in all areas of life carry way too much baggage, and it's this trying to please everybody. And I loved how you touch on that. Want to change lanes for a second? You had the opportunity to work very closely with Mariano Rivera, who is considered one of, if not the greatest relief pitchers of all time. I think that's subjective depending on who you are, but
Mm.
clearly his success speaks for itself. In your book, you talk about a conversation with him when he talks about there are no big situations, and it really hit me in regards to kind of the movie, and I forget the movie with Kevin Costner when he's the pitcher,
For
and
the
all,
love of the game, was that
yeah,
it?
that's it. And it
Yeah.
just, I immediately thought about that because in the movie, it's loud. You hear guys screaming at him, and all of a sudden, he just flips
Clear
that switch,
clear
and
the mechanism, I think he
exactly.
said.
And there's no,
Yeah.
and it's just him and the catcher. So, wanted to just maybe ask you just a little bit about the whole concept of big situations, but also just the opportunity of working with Mariano.
Yeah. I mean, it was the greatest because, for again, I started with the Yankees when I was 19. So I was still a very formidable mind, and I was working with guys that I grew up loving to watching them compete, and it was really amazing. But every night I would stretch Mo before the ninth inning. So he'd come into my office screaming my name. I'd have to hand him a green tea with some honey in the bottom and a Nature's Valley, one of those green granola bars. And we would literally just sit and talk every night. And then he'd suit up and he'd go out. And his work sometimes would be 10 minutes. He'd go out there and he'd mow down the opposition in 10 minutes and he'd be walking in. Sometimes it got a little tight, but for the most part, it was like watching an artist perform. And what the word that I think of when it comes to Mariano Rivera is one word, and it's conviction. And another guy that can care less what you think. Great guy, big edge to him. And I was at his house one winter. I lived around the corner from him in Westchester. And he says, "Can you come over?" So I go to his house. We go to the basement. I'm working on a massage, stretch, all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Listen, I've been watching you pitch since I was a kid in high school. How do you do it?" And he goes, "How do I do what, buddy?" And I said, "How do you get it done in the biggest situations?" And he says, "Well, I do three things." He goes, "I slow everything down, I quiet the noise, and I throw one pitch at a time." He says, "You see, I control the variables. I control the variables." And I said, "Well, that's great, but what about the big situations? World Series, game on the line, you name it." And he looked at me and he says, "Buddy, there are no big situations. We make situations big in our mind. We determine if a situation is big, but every situation is the same. Every situation is the same." And if you think about that, that stopped me in my tracks when I heard it as well. When you think about that and you say, "Wow, that is so true." Every situation, we could approach every situation the same way. It's the emotion that we put the situation that drives our adrenaline profile up and makes it a big situation. And we talk ourselves into it, or we listen to other people. "You're going to start a business? Do you know the risk with that?" And it's like, yeah, if your father was a mailman and your mother was a teacher, there's huge risk to starting your own business. And if your whole family is nothing but civil workers, they're going to say the same thing. But it's just your decision. So every situation is the same. It's the emotion that we apply to it, and it's also the emotion and words that we allow others to apply to our situation. And when we can overcome that and finally separate, it's liberating.
I whether you're a Yankee fan or not, when it comes to mental preparation, I think somebody who's a closer and only pitching typically in the ninth inning, but the fact that he can share those three things, and the third one being let's take it one pitch at a time. I think that goes back to a bunch of what we talked about is the small wins, stack the wins. And yeah, it's okay to have that big goal, that big dream, but the reality is the Yankees didn't win World Series, because Mariano said, "All right, I'm gonna win the World Series right now in Game 4 of the season on this one pitch." It was one pitch after another, and all of a sudden, the first month turns into the second month. I
And
think
Chris,
that
before we go, I just wanted to say this too. And I asked him this question: "Hey Mo, did you ever play the game for money?" And he goes, "No, I played because I love the game and I love to compete, and I made a lot of money." And I found that again to be another common thread. No player that I've ever met says, I want to go to the Hall of Fame, like they're talking about the Hall of Fame while they're still playing. That's an afterthought. They just want to go out and compete every at bat, every pitch, and have a great game because of their preparation.
Maybe a difficult question, a follow up question, but do you find, or did you find a difference of those players that competed for the love of the game for Mariano versus some of the other ones that I think you can see and you can tell that they only want to play for the money?
Just turn on the television today. If you look at every sport today and compare and contrast that to maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, very different game. All the games are different. This is an illustration of playing for money and preparing for money. You know, these players today, they're doing what they're doing. They are motivated contractually, but they're not as much motivated from a passion standpoint and just a pure love of the elements of the game. Like, you know, I closed up the last stadium. I was a part of that team when we wrapped up the old Yankee Stadium, and you know, I had my office in the new Yankee Stadium, first strength and performance coach there. And I remember the scene at the closing of the last stadium was amazing. You saw every player with Gatorade cups taking dirt and grass off of the field to save as a memento. They loved the game. There was a love affair for the game. And when you are around people that have a love affair for what they do and they freed themselves from outcomes, man, it's a different group. They speak different, they show up different, they have a different energy profile. They're excited for what they do. You almost have to try to stop them because they're just so into it. And that's what we should all strive for. And if you don't have that feeling or you've never had that feeling, you really got to sit back and ask yourself what you're doing.
That was like a mic drop right there. So have to ask you, and you can't answer your book, but I'm curious if you've read anything recently, or perhaps you're reading something currently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
You know, it's interesting. There's this drink that I love, and they used to send me a ton of this at the stadium. Hint, it's called Hint. So I'm reading the book right now, Undaunted, by Kara Golden, who founded the company, and I like it because she's very transparent. It's just what I'm reading in right now. I have the same problem that you mentioned earlier. That's why I write short books. Finishing them becomes a problem. Once I get the point, I'm ready to go on to the next one. But that's one that I'm reading right now because I enjoy the transparency of an entrepreneurial story, or really any story. And when I find a founder that shares the journey that they actually went through instead of the one that sounds good on a TV special, I embrace it because I get to say, "Hey, I get that person and that person gets me." So that's always been my speaking style, and it's always been my writing style, and I choose books that are not written by elitists, but are written by real people that want to share a real story.
I love that. We've been asking this question probably for the last year now, and I know you're familiar with the famous Jim Rohn quote: "You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with." If I could sit you down at a dinner table where you can level up and learn with any five people, dead or alive, who would you pick?
You're asking me for my five, huh? Interesting, interesting. You know, I got to put Mariano down there because he's definitely one of my favorite. You know, I may lose the entire audience right now by saying this, and I don't really care, like I said, but you know, since there was a book I read when I was in 8th grade and I never forgot it. It's called The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. And Don would definitely uh, be at that table. My grandmother, who passed away when I was my first year with the New York Yankees, would be at that table. She died at 100 years old, and just great wisdom on patience. Andy Pettit's a guy that I've always really connected deeply with, and I've always enjoyed his humor, his intensity, and also just his overall flair and love for competitiveness and perspective on life and things. And man, this last one's a tough one. Number five. I want to say Reggie Jackson, but I actually just thought of another guy that would be off the wall would be Kanye. Just think about the insanity of that table. But I'll go with Reggie Jackson because he is definitely an absolute character, and that he referred to himself as the straw that stirs the drink, and I'd have to agree with that.
That would be quite an interesting dinner during these challenging times, these last 15 plus months. I'm curious if there's anybody out there on social media that you follow that you think puts out uplifting information and messages that you'd like to possibly recommend to our listeners.
Hmm. Uplifting information. Um, part of this last 15 months, I've actually tried to get off of social media and not be as into it. Um, I follow a lot of coaches. I'm just pulling up to see who my most recent follow is. I mean, John Gordon's a buddy of ours that we like. He's definitely somebody that I follow over and over again. But these are really interesting questions. So I have to go. I'm going through my social media to see who it is that I follow the most. There's a singer I like. He's actually a Christian artist. His name is Danny Goki, and I follow him a lot because he's always got something positive to say. So I'm sure your audience knows John, so they've come across him. So I figured I'd change it up. But Danny Goki is somebody that I enjoy. I'm looking for more purity in messaging today as opposed to everything with strings attached to it. I like just people that can speak genuinely from their heart.
I, I think that goes back to what something we've touched on quite a bit is you being you as opposed to. I find a bunch of people, and I think I've probably been guilty, and maybe you have yourself of posting stuff that people will respond to. But I think for me, to your point, the people that I really follow and really interact with in the sense of looking at their stuff are the people that, to your point much earlier, are putting out stuff that's about who they really are. And this is something I believe. This is something I follow. This is something I want to promote because it's really who I am. And those, for me, are the people that I've really resonated with during these challenging times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are great questions because they make you think. And that's actually I say that somewhat loaded because I think that's what it's all about today. I believe that's what it's all about. You should surround yourself with people and material and inputs that actually make you think rather than just being an acceptor of, well, this is what these 9 influencers have said I should believe, or these authors or these other people. Like, the question I always ask is, what do you believe? And that's okay. Whatever you answer is great. But you have to believe something authentically and fully. And when you can say, this is what I believe, that's huge. I wrote this the other day, and I even had to correct myself a few minutes ago. Don't say I think as much. Say I believe, because now we know you believe in something, and whatever follows that word believe, you better actually believe it. I think versus I believe.
I love that. And I literally just caught myself in my mind. I was like, oh, I think. I'm like, nope, I believe. I love that. So for our listeners that want to connect with you, follow you, and also find out more about your book and the stuff that you put out, what's the best way for them to do so?
So my website is danacavalea.com. I do a daily blog. That's my pride and joy. I write it every morning, and it's a 60 to 90-second read. And then I do a monologue based podcast as well, that I actually put on YouTube. So you can get everywhere through my website, and the book's on Amazon, Habits of a Champion.
Awesome. And then last question we have for you is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
My parting words are very sporty in that it's, listen, go out and win today. That's what I tell myself every morning. And I sign my newsletter that too. Win today. Just win today. And in order to win today, you have to define what a win is for you. So when you go to attack your day, ask yourself, what is my win today? And go out and get it. And the win doesn't have to be the completion of something in totality. The win has to be a step towards completion in totality. So if you can do that and you say, I'm going to win today, I'm going to win today, I'm going to win today, and you add up all those win todays, you will win. And your win may not look like everybody else's, and that's okay too. It'll be your win with your stamp and your signature on it. And that's what you have to embrace. There's no two journeys that are the same. Nobody rides the same way. And you have to fully embrace it. And when you do, happiness is what emerges. And that's what everybody's pursuing, right?
I love that. I think it's a perfect way to end today's episode. Dana, I truly, truly appreciate your time, and I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Definitely. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for listening to episode number 345. Dana and I spoke about the concept that not everyone is rooting for you. And I think that is such a powerful concept to not only understand, but to completely and fully grasp. Dana shared some really powerful things with us today, and I hope you took some notes. But more importantly, I hope that you put some of those ideas, concepts, and strategies into action. To end today's episode, I would like to challenge you by echoing something that Dana said in his parting words. Go out and win today, and begin stacking those wins. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.